I showed up to my cousin's wedding and learned a secret my family's been hiding for 18 years. The invitation sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I even opened it. Cream-colored envelope with my name written in that fancy calligraphy people pay extra for. I knew what it was. My cousin Jake was getting married. Mom had already texted to make sure I'd received it, which was weird since the actual wedding was only 5 weeks away. Who sends wedding invitations a month before the event? People who aren't sure they want you there, that's who. Jake and I used to be close. Summers at our grandparents' lake house. Sneaking beers when we were 16. Covering for each other when one of us wanted to stay out past curfew. Then college happened and jobs and the distance that comes with adulthood. But that didn't explain the growing coolness between us over the last few years. The unanswered texts. The vague excuses when I suggested meeting up when I was in town. I'd assumed he was just busy with his life, his fancy accounting job, his fiancée who posted perfect-looking vacation photos on social media. When I finally called Mom about the invitation, she sounded relieved. "I'm so glad you're going, Ethan. It would be good for the family if you showed up. Not it would be fun, or Jake would be happy to see you. No, it would be good for the family. As if my presence would fulfill some obligation." I almost declined right then out of spite, but curiosity got the better of me. What exactly was going on with the Morgans that required my attendance as some sort of familial duty? I'd always sensed undercurrents when it came to Jake's mom, my Aunt Diana. The conversations that stopped when I entered rooms as a kid. The way Mom would purse her lips whenever Diana's name came up. I'd written it off as typical family drama, the kind that develops when siblings grow up and apart, nursing decades-old grievances that seem trivial to outsiders. Now I wondered if there was more to it. The drive to Lakeside Gardens took almost 4 hours. I could have flown, but something about this trip made me want the solitude of my car, the ability to turn around at any moment if things got weird. The venue was exactly what you'd expect. Manicured gardens, a picturesque lake in the background, white chairs arranged in perfect rows. I parked beside a row of luxury SUVs and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired. I hadn't been sleeping well lately, my mind churning with half-formed questions about why I was really here. The usher, someone I didn't recognize, asked, "Bride or groom?" And I said, "Groom," and he seated me near the middle on Jake's side. I scanned the gathering crowd for familiar faces. There was Uncle Rob, Jake's dad, looking distinguished with more silver at his temples than the last time I'd seen him. He caught my eye and nodded, but there was something guarded in his expression. Aunt Diana was fluttering around, checking flower arrangements, her smile too bright and brittle. My parents hadn't arrived yet, which was unusual. Mom was pathologically early to everything. Uncle Dave slid into the seat next to me, already smelling faintly of whiskey despite it being barely noon. "Ethan, good to see you, kid. Didn't know if you'd make it." He clapped me on the shoulder too hard. Uncle Dave was Mom's younger brother, the family screw-up who somehow always landed on his feet. He was the one person who still treated me normally, probably because he was too self-absorbed to maintain whatever pretense the rest of them were engaged in. "Almost didn't," I admitted. "Last-minute invitation." Dave snorted. "Yeah, well, things have been complicated." I wanted to ask what he meant, but the music started and everyone stood as the bridal party began their procession. Jake appeared at the altar, looking nervous but happy. We made brief eye contact and he gave me a nod that seemed both grateful and apologetic. The ceremony was mercifully brief. No personal vows or readings from obscure poets. Just the standard promises to love and cherish until death. I wondered, not for the first time, why people still believed those words when evidence to the contrary was all around us. At the reception, I found myself a drink and claimed a table at the edge of the tent. My parents had arrived during the ceremony and were now mingling with distant relatives. Mom's eyes occasionally darting in my direction as if checking that I was still there. I was nursing my second scotch when someone sat down beside me. A woman about my age with dark curly hair and Jake's exact smile. "This seat taken?" she asked, though she'd already claimed it. "All yours," I said, intrigued. "I'm Ethan, Jake's cousin." "Maria," she said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. Friend of the family. I raised an eyebrow. Funny. I thought I knew all the family friends. She laughed. And again I was struck by how her smile transformed her face into a feminine version of Jake's. I'm kind of a new addition. Or an old one, depending on how you look at it. She took a sip of her champagne. I grew up here in town, actually. Just never ran in the same circles as the Morgans until recently. We talked easily, the way strangers sometimes can when they have nothing to lose. She told me she'd been raised by a single mom, had gone to state college on scholarship, now worked as a physical therapist. I told her about my job in software development, my small apartment in the city, my recent breakup. Normal getting to know you stuff. Then she said something that made the hair on my arms stand up. It's weird being here. I only found out who my dad was last year. She traced the rim of her glass with one finger. My mom finally told me after keeping it secret my whole life. That must have been a shock, I said carefully. Maria shrugged. Yes and no. I'd always wondered, you know? And then to find out he was someone local, someone with another family. She glanced around the reception. Someone here, actually. It's complicated. Before I could ask the obvious follow-up question, she excused herself to use the restroom. I watched her weave through the tables, stopping briefly to speak to Aunt Diana, who gave her an awkward half-hug. Something cold settled in my stomach. I scanned the room with new eyes, noting the resemblance between Maria and Jake that I'd attributed to coincidence. The tension in the air wasn't imagined. It was thick enough to choke on. Uncle Dave found me again during dinner, dropping heavily into the chair Maria had vacated. His tie was loose, his eyes slightly unfocused. Surviving this circus? He asked, reaching for my drink and taking a swig without asking. Barely, I said. Things feel off.
No shit.
He laughed. It's the wedding of the decade. Jake Morgan and Perfect Melissa, with a surprise guest appearance by the secret love child. I stared at him. What? Dave looked at me blearily. You're kidding. You don't know. When I just kept staring, he lowered his voice. Maria, Jake's half-sister. Rob's daughter from the affair nobody talks about. He shook his head. It's wild seeing her here. After all these years of pretending she didn't exist. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The strained family gatherings. The gradual distancing of Jake. The cryptic comment from my mother about it being good for the family if I attended. They'd all known. Every single one of them had known about Maria and kept it from me. For 18 years, if Dave was to be believed. I found my mother by the dessert table, chatting with one of the bridesmaids. I didn't bother with pleasantries. I need to talk to you. Now. She must have seen something in my face because she immediately excused herself and followed me out to the garden, away from the music and laughter. What's wrong? Are you feeling okay? Maria, I said. Jake's half-sister. When were you planning to tell me? Mom's face went pale. She glanced around to make sure no one was within earshot. Who told you that? Was it Dave? I swear, that man can't hold his liquor or his tongue. Does it matter who told me? It's true, isn't it? She sank onto a stone bench, suddenly looking 10 years older. It's complicated, Ethan. Uncomplicate it. Now. She sighed. Yes, Maria is Rob's daughter. From an affair he had almost 20 years ago. Before Jake's senior year of high school. The timeline matched up. Jake and I were the same age, both 26 now. And everyone knew? All this time. Not everyone, she said quickly. Just the adults. And Jake, of course, but not until he was in college. Finding out really affected him. That's why he pulled away from you. He was ashamed, I think. Worried about what you'd think. What I'd think. I was incredulous. Why would I judge Jake for something his father did? People aren't always rational about these things, Mom said quietly. Diana wanted to keep it quiet, to protect Jake's relationship with his father, to avoid scandal. It was a different time, Ethan. Not that different. And what about Maria? Did anyone think about protecting her? Mom had the grace to look ashamed. Rob paid child support. But yes, the agreement was discretion. Maria's mother wanted to raise her daughter without complications. At least that's what Diana told us. And you all just went along with it. For 18 years. Letting Maria grow up without knowing her father, her half-brother. It wasn't my secret to tell. Bullshit, I said, and Mom flinched. I rarely swore in front of her. You're the one who's always talking about how family comes first. Apparently that only applies to the family members you want to acknowledge. That's not fair, she protested. But there wasn't much conviction in her voice. Why is Maria here now? What changed? Mom twisted her wedding ring around her finger, a nervous habit she'd had for as long as I could remember. She found out on her own. Something about needing medical history for a procedure, and her mother finally telling her the truth. She contacted Rob about a year ago. Diana was upset at first, but Jake insisted on getting to know his sister. He's the one who insisted she be invited to the wedding. I stood up, needing to move to process. And the last-minute invitation to me? Was that Jake's idea too? I thought it would be easier if you found out this way. If you could meet Maria in person. See that she's part of the family now. Easier for whom? Not for me. And certainly not for Maria. Having to navigate a room full of strangers who've been hiding her existence her entire life. I left my mother sitting there and went back inside, scanning the room for Maria. I found her at the bar, watching the dancing with a wistful expression. When she saw me approaching, something in my face must have given me away, because she said, "You know, don't you? Uncle Dave has a big mouth when he's drunk," I admitted.
I'm sorry.
This must be incredibly weird for you. Maria laughed, but it was hollow. Weird doesn't begin to cover it. 3 months ago, Jake shows up at my apartment saying he's my brother and wants to make up for lost time. Next thing I know, I'm invited to his wedding as some kind of, I don't know, peace offering. Public acknowledgement. Did you know that no one told me about you? That I'm finding out today? At the wedding? She looked genuinely surprised.
No.
Jake said the whole family knew. That they'd known for years. Not me, I said. They kept me in the dark. Just like they kept you hidden away. We stood in silence for a moment, watching the couples twirl on the dance floor. Jake and his bride. Uncle Rob and Aunt Diana. Her smile fixed in place like it might shatter if she relaxed for even a second. My parents, now reunited and swaying awkwardly to a song that was too fast for slow dancing. I thought I was crashing the party, Maria said finally, forcing them to acknowledge me. But it turns out I was invited as part of some elaborate family healing exercise that no one bothered to explain to me. Or you, apparently. The Morgans and their secrets, I said, raising my glass in a mock toast. May they eventually choke on them. Maria clinked her glass against mine. I'll drink to that, cousin. We ended up sitting at an empty table in the corner, comparing notes and filling in gaps in each other's understanding of our shared family. I told her about summers at the lake house, about Jake's phase of wanting to be a rock star, about the time Uncle Rob got food poisoning at Thanksgiving and threw up in the good gravy boat. She told me about growing up with a mother who refused to speak about her father, about the story she'd constructed in her mind about who he might be, about the shock of discovering he'd been living just across town her entire life. As the night wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself wondering what would happen next. Would Maria become a regular at family gatherings? Would this secret, now exposed, destroy the careful facades everyone had constructed? Or would they simply build new facades, incorporating Maria into the narrative while pretending they'd never tried to erase her in the first place? I decided I didn't care. I was tired of the pretense, the unspoken rules, the collective agreement to ignore uncomfortable truths. I exchanged numbers with Maria and promised to stay in touch, to be the cousin she should have had all along. As I drove away from Lakeside Gardens, I felt lighter somehow. The Morgans had been hiding a secret for 18 years, but it wasn't my burden to carry anymore. It never should have been.